Welcome back to another edition of Check Call. Don't forget to subscribe to Check Call, the newsletter on FreightWaves.com if you haven't already. Today we welcome back the one and only Alex Schwarm, Head of Data and AI at Arrive Logistics. Welcome back to the show, Alex. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me, Mary.
I am excited about today because we've had you on the show before, so we know you're kind of, the expert in all things data and applications and, making actionable plans from data analysis. You can have the best data analysis in the world, but you still need to make a plan from it. And I believe that was one of the first things we covered on your first periods on the show. But today we're getting into that hot button issue, which is AI and how everyone wants to incorporate AI everywhere. And I just can't wait for an AI refrigerator to come around the same way that we had Bluetooth and everything, like a Bluetooth refrigerator. I just can't wait for it. What do you think is the most insane thing we'll see AI in like the least practical way in like the next 5 years? We have to go on tangent first.
I think we're already seeing it with did you see the pin that they had where you like put your hand out and you talk to it and it has a little projection so it doesn't have a screen? And people were like, why do I need this? I have a phone that has a screen. Why would I buy this other thing? And
Okay, I think we found it because I'm still waiting for a Bluetooth fridge to be helpful. Um, but hey, to each his own. Maybe the Bluetooth fridge will team up with AI to make a grocery list or something. It would be great if it could still like go do the grocery shopping for me, or even pay for my own groceries. If it didn't have to come out of my bank account, I'd be pretty happy.
direct integration with Instacart has videos of what you have in your fridge.
That's actually becoming logical. Okay, so back on our topic for today. Um, not the most ridiculous use cases of AI, the most practical use cases of AI. And so, one of the things that I think it's kind of because we've talked about how it's most commonly or the easiest application for it is in a lot of that customer service roles of not necessarily the chatbot, but seeing that there's a missing signed BOL or there's missing paperwork, it's just going to automatically trigger an email to that person and kind of do something like that. So in that part of the customer service, it's top tier. But what are some of the most common applications that a brokerage will end up using AI for?
Great question. So maybe I'll start kind of like at the high level, kind of at Arrive, we talk about something in terms of the co-pilot model, and so that's our goal is to power our teams and not obviously replace them. So that's our goal, and that's what we're focusing on. And this, like you said, this stuff's been around for a long time. We do matching, we do cost prediction. RXO talked about like an automated truck check-in system. CH talked about a spot quoting capability. We've developed internally some capabilities around the spot quoting side as well that we're doing some testing on. We're doing some automated truck posting based on emails. So really kind of leaning in on supporting those kind of tasks that are really kind of data acquisition tasks. If you kind of break it down and kind of drudgery of kind of like, okay, I have this origin, I have this destination, I have this equipment, or you know what I mean, and trying to or doing data entry, all of those kinds of more, less value add and just like drudgery work to get that together and giving that back to the rep so they can be more efficient. I think the other side is on the sales side, like enabling that rep with all the information that's relevant to that customer so you can have a useful conversation, so you're not just talking high level but talking about really solving business problems. So I think that those are kind of some key areas that we'll see continue to grow and continue to get better and better over time.
I think the AI and sales is kind of the most interesting part of it because, like you said, it's tedious. So because you could be one phone call, you could be prospecting someone that's into heavy machinery. The next one could be automobiles. The next one could be food. The next one could be retail. So being able to be knowledgeable about each one of like basically every industry when that's not something that like obviously you haven't as a salesperson, you've probably not spent 10 years in each one of those to kind of understand everything. I think that's kind of going to be a huge win of just kind of, okay, I'm about to do a prospect call, like just give me some important talking points, things I need to consider, common challenges that come with shipping this specific item, because that would mean that the prep for that call would be so much faster, and then I'm not spending my whole day researching everything, and I can kind of make it work. And I didn't even think about that kind of application, and I kind of like it. I like it a lot.
I think that the other thing that we've started to look at is, just as you said, you can't be an expert in everything, but we do have experts in specific fields. So maybe we indicate that and we share, hey, here's a prospect that maybe is a really good fit for you, that based on your experience, based on the customers you've worked with in the past, and based on like your success and maybe your specific niche, this is actually a good prospect for you, and maybe this one is better for Sally or whoever to go after because she has better experience in that area.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. Like even kind of having your salespeople specialize in different industries. So, excuse me. So that way, you have someone with the most experience calling, because obviously that person on the other end, they're going to know right off the bat if you know what you're talking about or not. And you don't want to put someone up there that's almost a guaranteed fail, because that's just not good for your brand or your salesperson's, kind of mental fortitude.
And it's a waste of everybody's time, right? Salesperson, they want to be successful. The person you're talking to, they don't want to talk to someone who doesn't know what they're talking about. How do we find the best match between those two people, and kind of really make sure that both sides are getting something out of the conversation?
Yeah, I really like that application, because I see it being the most commonly applied in kind of that rate quoting and all of that, because it can say, okay, well, historically, it can go through pretty much all the loads in your system, and say, okay, well, in the past, we've paid this much for it at this time of the year when it has this kind of constraint on it. And that's really, really helpful, because obviously it can go through a whole bunch of data much faster than me sitting there clicking through things. And I love that aspect of it. But I kind of like some of the more creative solutions, that come out of the sales side, or even I'm sure there are some people doing some really innovative stuff with it on that rate quoting side. Because I think the future of it is more in kind of those day-to-day applications and less on the chat bot of like, what can we do to help you today? How can we help you get a quote? Because those never quite end up working out how you want them to.
And at the end of the day, you have a relationship, right? That's this industry is driven on relationships. And so how do we enable the rep to have the best information so they can give useful quotes back, to give meaningful, competitive quotes, and make sure that conversation again is beneficial for both sides. And so that and at the end of the day, if you have a problem, you need to have somebody to talk to. You need to have somebody to solve that problem. We know in this industry that happens a lot. So that needs to be part of that conversation.
You mean, well, this is an industry where there's problems on the regular, and not every day goes completely flawless? What?
Yeah, we never have hurricanes or flat tires or none of that happens.
Or shippers just randomly adding another warehouse to their facility and not telling anybody? Never happened before.
No, never.
I feel like that has to be a relation. I just kind of thought of something. I feel like the ability to send a strong rate quote has to be, especially to like carriers you've worked with all the time, that has to be another kind of aspect of that relationship building, because then that carrier knows you're not just trying to pull one over on them. You're coming with informed things of just like, hey man, I need you to be as low as you can. And that's when it's like, hey, like I know we've done it for this in the past, like if you could, like here's your wiggle room, like just being upfront with you, this is how much you have to play with, otherwise I can't give you the load. And I think that that's like another aspect of like, man, we're in this together, like we're just trying to get through it, we're just trying to get through to the other
Exactly.
side.
Exactly.
So we've kind of covered the operation side of it, but one of the things that I'm curious to see how it plays out is kind of how the role of AI and kind of that machine learning aspect of it really helps on that business development and kind of that data processing side of things. So what like is kind of is there a good use case for some AI enhancements over there outside of just that like it saves that analyst a bunch of time? Is there kind of that good use case for that reporting and data mining aspect of things?
Yeah, for sure. It's still kind of being developed. It's not perfect, but there has been some really good advancements in. So if you know about databases and you know about, you have to learn the special language, SQL, SQL to get access to that data, and a lot of people don't want to spend the time to do that. And so a lot of the new things that people have are you can provide a human question, right? A real question. And then if you have your data structured in such a way that you have definitions for things, then the system can create that SQL statement and give you an answer to that. And you can ask follow-up questions, and it actually works pretty well. It's not 100%. It's getting better, but for very specific questions where maybe a dashboard isn't going to give you your answer, or kind of really nuanced questions of if this and this and this, like how much does it cost to ship this hazmat teams yada yada from this place to this, you know what I mean? That kind of, and what did it cost 3 months ago versus today? Like those kinds of things are, that's something that you can do today. Again, we're still kind of, and when I say we, I mean the whole industry, and all the people working on AI, et cetera, are still developing this stuff, but we're still making pretty good progress on that. I think we'll get to a place pretty soon where that will be kind of the default way people will get a lot of answers to questions.
I mean, I think it just makes the most sense because that way you don't have to. We've talked about it on Running on Ice, the cold chain show of like, there's always that one guy in the warehouse that says, okay, well, um, I've been here for 40 years. I know just on like a gut instinct how much dry ice I need. Well, if that guy is off, you don't want your production to be able to come to a halt. You need to be able to kind of have that expert at your fingertips. And I think that goes kind of like even more so on the brokerage floor because there's always that one guy who can look in a lane and price it and just know that that is dead on. That's dead on. He's within maybe $20. It's dead on accurate, but that's not everybody on the floor. That's the one guy out of maybe 50 guys on the floor. So I think being able to have that kind of resource at your fingertips as opposed to like hollering down, going like, Joe, how much should this be? And Joe's like, I don't know. I got a whole bunch of other stuff plus my job to do. Like, look it up, man. I think that that's really gonna help out a lot. And especially with some of those new people who don't quite understand the transportation world because it's it's hard enough to try and understand what can go on a truck, what supply chain is and how to move trucks, while still also trying to learn, hey, this is something that you now have to price, and if you mess it up then your paycheck's affected, and that's kind of a lot to be thrown. So I think anything that kind of gives that support is going to be like instrumental.
And like you said, I mean, you can do it yourself manually, but you know what? If you can have a system that'll answer your question faster and give you the supporting data behind it, and you can say, hey, you know what? You use these, 5 loads to come up with that. That's actually not relevant to me. And be able to have that human in the loop to validate that. And that's really, I mean, when we talk about these things, a lot of times I say, these are like 80 to 90% solutions. But you know what? If you have a human in the loop, they can solve that 10 to 20% problem, and they can, but they can still kind of cover that 80%. Like the 80%, they don't have to do. They don't have to go to that dashboard. You look at this up, enter this, enter that. They could just kind of, I want this, and then get that information a lot faster.
Kind of that it's the use case that we see even when like you're messing around with chat gpt like just with your friends, it gets you like 80% of the way there, but it still needs someone to take it the rest of the way, finalize it, polish it, make it sound like it didn't come from a robot. It's kind of it's kind of that aspect of it'll get you so close, but you still need to carry it across the finish line. And just kind of the same way, like we've talked about before, the same way that your data analysis stuff, like you can have the best data analysis tools in the world, and that could include AI or anything else, but you still need someone to sit there, see those results, and say, okay, this is the actionable plan that we can make on top of it. And I think that that is often the part of everything that everybody forgets, is that you do, like, you have all these tools, but you still need to do something with it.
And I think that's where a lot of people kind of make a bit of a mistake where they want to bring something in that does the whole thing. And I think that is a whatever it is, whatever step in your process that you're trying to optimize. I think that very frequently solving 80% of the problem, and I talked about this multiple times in my company, is like, before, if you 2 years ago when I was working in this area and doing like natural language processing and stuff like that, it would, like, somebody would come to me, solve this problem, and I'd say, okay, it's going to take a year. Now it's a weekend to get to 80%. But you know what? To get to 100%, yeah, it's still like I need 3 years and two PhDs, So, but why do that? Why don't you solve the 80% problem, and have somebody who's enabled to do that more effectively?
I think it's just completely game changing. And especially as a former pricing person who sat there and had to run all the bids against each other and kind of figure out like where everybody ranked, which it was literally a whole morning where you would sit there, compile everything into one giant Excel sheet, run a macro, literally disappear and just let your computer do its thing because it like could barely process it, let it do it for 2 hours and then come back and figure out, okay, was this great, was one column off in this whole thing, and now I have to restart it over again. um, and I think that that's a really great use case of that AI part of just saying, okay, compare all, like if I have 10 responses to this LTL bid all on this rate base, like compare them all, tell me who's first, second, third, fourth. And I feel like that's a very reasonable and accessible thing that AI should be able to do, and it shouldn't take my computer being locked up for 2 hours to get it done.
Agreed.
Honestly though, on that part, the real disheartening thing is when you realize that like your formula was just one off and you got to restart it all. That's like the worst. Or when never, I bet you've never ever made a mistake like that. Just perfection 24/7.
So many times. That's why you have teams. You can't have one person do everything. You got to have somebody there that you work with to say that doesn't look right.
So, when it comes to the demand forecasting part of things, because that's honestly, every brokerage has to kind of say, okay, well, these are our busy months, these are not. These are kind of months that we can look for customers that have, like, that's their busy season. How do you kind of, is that a good spot for AI to be used in that demand forecasting? And then in turn, is that something that brokers can then offer back to their shippers, is kind of that planning aspect of it?
Sure. So I kind of think that leans more into like the machine learning side. And so, and on the machine learning side, I kind of split that into maybe four different areas. So there's like the today and the tomorrow problem that you're trying to solve of like, what's my capacity, what's my volume, and how does that interact, and what does that look like? Then you kind of start thinking about maybe next week, and maybe there's a little bit of seasonality that plays into that. Maybe there's something there. And then when you talk about a quarter level analysis, that's more like macro, a bit more macro, and more seasonality. And then when I think of like a year, I think of David Spencer. I think of macroeconomic analysis, heavy seasonality, and so a lot more of kind of those kinds of assessments rather than kind of fine grained kind of analysis. And so those different kinds of time frames are all have very different data that you use to solve for them. And so, having that, maybe for today and tomorrow, we're talking about truck to load ratios. We're talking about, really, fine grain information. We're talking about metrics in terms of tender rejections and things like that we might see. But then again, as you look more into the future, you're going to see that macroeconomics and seasonality have a much bigger influence, and you have kind of more more expertise that you bring to the table, I would say, rather than kind of data analysis. And that's kind of like a shift that you see when you look at those two different things. Does that make sense?
That does make sense though, because the market AI will never replace that market expert. You still need that person to kind of say, okay, well, this is typically what happens. These are the trends. These are things that we need to consider that maybe, this AI or the machine learning or anything like that doesn't always take into effect, because obviously certain weather events or other things or other factors, the best system isn't necessarily going to be able to account for those. And so this is kind of a contingency plan, but you still need those people to say like, okay, this is what we should actually do. Like you mentioned, it's you need that's in that 20% of like, this is the finalization of it.
Agreed. Agreed. And I think also, like, when we think about those more short term things, the volume of data that's being used is just like, it's just too much for a human to fit all in their head at any given time. And so that's where it kind of shifts from kind of a more of a machine learning problem versus kind of an expertise oriented problem, if that makes sense.
We've had you on the show a few times, so we already know where you stand on hot dogs and sandwiches. But this time we're coming to you for the expertise of food that you enjoy to consume. So, if you could have any color of food for the rest of your life, what would you choose?
Wow. Uh, so my initial thought is red because, man, I love pasta and I love marinara, but I love beer more. I gotta go with brown, and I think that adds in a whole bunch of other great things like also whiskey and all fried foods. So that I think that I gotta go with brown.
I mean, it is the most diverse. It is the most diverse option because I mean, you could have a deep fried Oreo. It's summer fair season in the Midwest here, so you name it, it will deep fry it here. There is one though that does deep fried chocolate covered strawberries, and you could have that because it would be brown with a bonus of red. So
There you go. Got it both covered.
so if anyone has any good beer recommendations or any questions about, AI and logistics and kind of that customer service model, where can they find you outside the show?
I'm on LinkedIn. Please hit me up. I'm happy to have a chat with anyone that's interested in this area. I'm incredibly interested in this area. Also, feel free to jump on arrivelogistics.com as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Find check all the podcasts anywhere you get your podcasts, like Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Don't forget to check out all the other incredible FreightWaves shows, and don't forget to subscribe to the newsletter on freightwaves.com/checkcall. See you on the internet.